All right, let's talk about the monthly economic report for March 2024. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. The great news is here in the text above it, because it says, this month we changed the valuation of asteroids to be closer to the actual market value and less affected by price fluctuations. If you remember last month, this messed up the graph last month. Last month it looked like mining went off the charts, but that's only because CCP was using ore valuations to calculate the amount mined. And that doesn't make sense, because essentially if you manipulate the ore price, which is a good that nobody trades in anyway, you can, or very few people trade in, you can manipulate that graph. And they took that out. Now they're normalizing it. They're saying, because by low volume that highly affect the asteroid prices, and now they're looking at refined value, which just makes a ton more sense. So that's one. And the other one is also big. We also removed items from the consumer price index that we feel should not be in there, because these items are mostly traded between players and NPCs. And that is a change that should have happened, years ago. So yes, and somebody in chat is saying, what are you saying? People don't buy ore? Compared to the amount of ore traded, compared to the amount of minerals traded, is actually quite small. That is true. I'm not saying nobody trades in it, but fewer people trade in it. Asteroids are now valued at 70% refining value. The following graphs are affected by this, yada yada. And overseer personal effects, sleeper components. So this is the stuff that drops from events that is sold to NPC buy orders. This is blue loot from wormholes that is also sold to NPC buy orders, Triglavian data as well, and rogue drone analysis data as well. So these are all blue loot, red loot. Stuff from various regions of space, and they are now removed from the consumer price index, which is true, because they were a big part of the economy, but they don't fluctuate in value, so it doesn't really matter. Now let's look at some of the graphs. Having said that, they went back and they normalized all the old graphs, which is great, because now we can see that there actually wasn't a huge spike in mining value in February, but we do see a continuing upward trend that started in last September. So we have a 6 to 7 month upward trend in mining, which is great to see, and we also have a similar uptick in destruction going on, which is also great to see. And production, we had that huge spike over the last months that has corrected a little bit, but it's still at very, very high levels compared to the last 5 years. So overall, these graphs look fantastic. If we go down, we can see here, we could look at how that is split up by region, but it hasn't really changed all that much. There's no significant uptick or downtick in any one region. The next graph I want to look at, and the reason we're going to look at it in here is because we have not. Matthew hasn't updated his Power BI report, the one that we usually look at when the monthly economic report comes out. But this is the ISK sinks and faucets. And if you remember, in the last few months, we had a fairly steady money supply in EVE Online. So sinks and faucets were in balance. Now we do have a slight increase again. And that is because the active ISK delta is much lower than it was in the last few months. So if we can have a look at the old report. Let me pull it up right here. Any day now. We can look at, this is only up to February, but if we look at the active ISK delta, in the last 3 months, we had active ISK deltas of -68 and -75. So there was massive amounts of ISK leaving the game due to either players becoming inactive after 3 months, or bots being banned, or a combination of the two. And now that is much less, and that is, you know, certainly a good thing in terms of player activity. But overall, that means that the faucets that are quite significant, so 165 in faucets, if you compare the faucets to previous month, we see that in February we had 150, 175, 175. So those are compared to what they were, you know, 2 or 3 years ago when we were in the 80 or 90 range. Those are massive ISK faucets that are being pushed into the game, and they can't really be offset by the LP store and transaction taxes and broker fees that are the major ISK sinks in the game. And so overall, we do have an increase in money supply. If we look at the money supply overall, that's this is the total amount of ISK in the game. Then we see that it is at a very high level. It's highest at least since 2017, as you can see here. And so overall, it's a very high level. If we look at that on the ISK velocity graph, though, we see that the ISK velocity has been, you know, fairly standard, especially if you take out contracts and Plex related items. It's stuck down here. What this means is that the average time that an ISK exchanges hands is around 0.5 if you factor in contracts and Plex, whereas it used to be closer to 1. So we do still have a very low ISK velocity. If you want to keep it in simple terms, this just means that there's more people sitting on money and fewer people actually doing stuff with their money, which, you know, is it's just a thing that's been going on for a long time, and it's not changing even now that we have very high production going on. Then let's go back here and look at the faucets over time. So you can see that still sleeper components. So, you know, Wormhole Blue Loot is still at a very high daily level. Overall, it is, you know, we have a separate graph on Wormhole Blue Loot back here, and you can see that out of C5 and C6 wormholes, we still have 21 trillion, and that is even higher than it has been in the last 2 or 3 months. So this is pretty massive. The total amount of Blue Loot in C5 and C6 wormholes, 20 trillion, is, if you look at the other sinks in the game, is more than the total that is spent by all players in LP stores. And, you know, I've been, you know, every week people write to me and say, oh, why do you always say, you know, nerf Blue Loot, nerf Blue Loot? Look, like this, it's not even like, if you ask Mark Resurrectus, okay, if you ask Mark Resurrectus, the wormhole candidate on the CSM, even he acknowledges that something needs to be done. We might not agree on what should be done, all right, but this is not Oz in a box, you know, coming up with weird ideas. This is an issue, right? If you take the total amount of ISK spent in the LP store and you compare it to C5, C6 wormhole, which is just very tiny portion of the game population, that and yes, I know it's hard, it's challenging, and I know it takes a lot of big ships, yada yada yada. I don't doubt that. I don't want to take it away completely. I'm just saying you need to put those into relation, right? So, and if you come at me for this, go ask your CSM representatives. I should say ex-CSM representative, because, you know, he's CCP Jotun now, but go ask him. Go ask him how he feels about Wormhole Blue Loot and whether that should be something done about it. All right. Yeah. And C4s don't even count. Unless they travel to their C5, C6 farm holes. So, yep. So we have an increase in money supply in EVE again. Overseer personal effects. There wasn't a big event. So this is just more or less flat for the month. Tracked avian data is from abyssal space, also quite flat, and everything else is very uneventful. If we look at the top 8 sinks and faucets over time, we see that ratting is going on again. All right. Bounties are going on. Great. Commodity market, that is the NPC buy orders, right? That's for example, the blue loot. In this case, also the red loot. And invasions and incursions are down here. Everything else is pretty much flat, nothing to write home about. And everything else we already talked about. And here we have the new economic indices. So this is the result of the correction to the consumer price index. It's we would have to compare it to the old graph. It's not a world of change here. If you look at the other indices here, the reason that the mineral price index is this high is because there are still a few bottleneck minerals. We've talked about that in the past a lot. This is still the result of the resource redistribution by CCP that started in 2020 and just made the mineral prices more than double. If you translate into primary and secondary production price indices, that doesn't pull through completely, but that's because there's other components in it and because not all margins are passed on. But yeah. And then that's pretty much it. This is the interesting new graph they added last month. This is ship and module price indices since 2018. Modules have gotten a bit cheaper in the last month, but overall, I mean, there's, if you compare that to the level of detail of my dashboard, I think we're better off analyzing that market with our dashboard rather than the MER. And I think that's it. Then we're going to return to the regular stream and do the Oz report.